Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 9th, 2009. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week I'm flying solo by the brewpot as I brew up a brew-in-a-bag beer. I put the Australian brewing method to the test. If you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And you can follow me on Twitter, my username, Basic Brewing, all one word. Also, you can find me on Facebook. My username there is Basic Brewing James. And we also have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook. If you become a fan of the show there, I'll be sending out occasional notices when shows like this are posted and such. There are also photos out there. In fact, photos of this brewing session that you're going to hear today. So if you're curious, check it out. Our 2009 Brewers Logbooks are still in stock. You can check them out in our online store, basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us and click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show, and we appreciate your support. The little extract wheat beer that I've brewed for the Basic Brewing Radio Brew Your Own Magazine experiment is sitting patiently in the basement. If you haven't heard of the experiment, BBR and BYO are working together to conduct this collaborative experiment, and we want you to take part of it. The question being asked in the experiment is whether leaving beer in the primary fermenter on the primary yeast for an additional 2 weeks will affect the flavor and or gravity of the beer. Our original proposal was to start a batch of beer in the normal way. Then when it comes time to rack or package the beer, rack only half away from the primary and then leave the rest for an additional 2 weeks. But since then, we got some feedback from you guys, and Chris Colby, editor of Brew Your Own, has come up with 2 additional methods that you can use for this experiment if you'd like. He's written about those in his blog, and if you go to basicbrewing.com/experiment, you can find a link to that blog entry. And also, I hope by the time you hear this, we should have the online form ready for you to report your results. But in the meantime, please take copious notes on the details of your process so that we can collect that data when you're done. The deadline for reporting your results is May 15th. And I appreciate everybody's efforts who's taking part. And I hope that we'll be able to get some good info on whether leaving the beer on the yeast for an additional 2 weeks actually does have an impact, or not. By the way, I'm going to rack my beer, my little wheat beer, to the secondary this weekend, which will be the 2-week mark in the life of that beer. And at the same time, I'll also bottle up a handful of singles. Then, 2 weeks later, I'll package it all up, both from the primary that's been in there for 4 weeks and from the secondary that's been in there for 2 weeks. And before that, 2 weeks in the primary. A quick homebrew legislation update from Mark Emily up in Washington State. If you'll recall, we're following the progress of the bill that would loosen restrictions on transporting and basically sharing homebrew. This would allow, among other things, Washingtonians to conduct homebrew contests and the Homebrewers Conference, I think, which would be very cool. Anyway, Mark says, on Monday morning, Senate Bill 5060 passed the House 90-3. It'll be moving back to the Senate for concurrence soon, but this is a great step forward. We're always looking into the next step in the process. Not sure the details yet, but as always, Mark says, folks can check in at wahomebrewers.org/legal for the current details. So if you're up there and you care about this law, this is me talking. Go to wahomebrewers.org/legal and find out how you can help in that process. Thanks, Mark. This isn't homebrew legislation, but I heard from Kevin in Rivesville, West Virginia, that there are efforts to raise the limit on beer ABV in that state from 6% to 12%. So good luck over there in West Virginia. Let's take a look into the mailbag, shall we? Graham from Gainesville, Florida, writes after hearing last week's show on Brew in a Bag with Dan and Jeff. Graham says, I just heard your interview with the Australian Brew-in-a-Baggers and wanted to share a few thoughts. First, for anyone here in the States who wants to get into brew-in-a-bag but can't find the material for the bag, look for paint strainer bags at your local hardware store. According to Graham, they come in 1 and 5 gallon sizes in his area, and they seem to provide the right level of filtering needed. Also, Graham says, I do a sort of partial mash in a bag as my main technique now, with fantastic results. And the only equipment I needed was a 5-gallon igloo cooler and a 5-gallon paint strainer. The bag, that is. Basically, I use 7 to 7.5 pounds of grain and a water ratio of about 1.8 quarts per pound. Thin mashing, Graham says. I use that volume to hit my mashing temperature, then let it rest for an hour. I add enough boiling water after the mash is complete to raise the whole thing up to about 170 degrees Fahrenheit for a mash out. This makes my 5-gallon cooler come right to the top with water. Graham says I stir that around, let it rest for a few minutes. Then I pull the paint strainer bag with the grains out of the cooler. And he says, what I've found is that with the paint strainer, there is no need for recirculation. It's a fine enough filter as is. Graham says, at this point, you can stop here and start your boil as normal, but I found that I can increase my efficiency a few more points by doing a real sparge with about a gallon of 170 degrees Fahrenheit water. I just throw the grain bag back in the cooler, throw the sparge water on top, and stir really well. After about 10 minutes, I pull the bag out again and add that liquid to the kettle. When the boil is almost done, I throw in 1 to 2 pounds of light dry malt extract or some unrefined sugar, Graham says, to bring my gravity into normal ranges and to hit whatever recipe I'm making. Using this process, I hit about 82% efficiency. This was a jump from my previous efficiency of about 65%. And the first time I used this process, my simple 1045 Weizen turned into a 1068 Weizenbock accidentally. So there you go. There's a twist on the brew-in-the-bag technique. By the way, if you think 1.8 quarts per pound is thin, stay tuned. Here's another brewer's experience. Todd from Tiffin, Ohio writes, sometime around the beginning of the year, I ran across the brew-in-a-bag idea from the land of Oz. I had had about 20 extract/partial mash brews under my belt, and I was itching to try my hand at an all-grain batch. Unfortunately, my space and money constraints didn't make jumping into all-grain entirely feasible, at least not with a quote-unquote traditional multi-vessel system. Todd says the brew-in-a-bag gave me some hope. I had one problem. I don't have a propane burner nor a big pot. I do all my boils on the stovetop, a ceramic flat top at that. Todd says, coincidentally, I just procured a 3-gallon carboy and some 1-gallon wine jugs after watching your 6-pack IPA adventure. I put 2 and 2 together and decided to try a small batch of brew-in-a-bag all-grain brewing since my pot could easily handle 4 gallons for the boil. I brewed up a nice Simcoe Pale Ale. That sounds good. And a low-gravity English bitter. Also sounds good. Both ales taste great, Todd says. I have no complaint about the flavor or appearance of the results. Actually, both brews are just about gone now. Well, good. However, like you mentioned in the interview, I did experience a huge amount of trub. Perhaps my clear, wort-trained brain got in the way of common sense, but I lost a fair amount of my yield, a half a gallon of the 3-gallon batch to the trub. The other issue I had was the English bitter had a very low attenuation. Even though I was aiming for a low-alcohol session ale, I ended up with a 1.69% ABV brew. The original gravity was 1033, which was right on target in regards to my recipe, but it only fermented down to 1020, which is only 38 or 39% attenuation. I don't know if the problem had anything to do with brew-in-a-bag or if there was something funny with some other aspect of my brew session. At any rate, I was able to experience all-grain brewing and make 2 tasty, if very small, batches. If I can solve the attenuation problem and learn to live with cloudy wort, I may do this more often. And Todd says, even if I don't, I think the technique is worth investigating as a partial mash alternative. So there you go. Very interesting. Not sure what's going on there with the attenuation of the English session ale, but if the pale ale the Simcoe ale. If that did okay, I wouldn't blame the brew in a bag method. Theoretically, according to popular belief, a thinner mash should yield a thinner beer. So, I don't know. Curious. Don't know what's going on there. But anyway, after talking to Dan and Jeff last week, and hearing from these two guys, I was itching to try my own full-scale brew in a bag batch. So, kind of as a spur of the moment, I did. Well, it's 20 minutes till noon and 44 degrees with overcast skies here in northwest Arkansas. The wind is really whipping along outside, and as I see from the dangling strings from my hop trellis, it's coming from the west because the strings are pointing almost horizontally toward the east as they are buffeted by the wind. And I'm sitting in my garage. The garage door is fully open, and I have a side window cracked. So there is a draft coming through the garage. So I'm still wary of using propane in the garage. Sure, I'm a wimp, but I'm going to make a session ale, and what I call an English session ale. Very simple recipe, and I made it. The last time I made it, it was really nice. So I wanted to make a nice light gravity summer beer. The recipe goes as follows for a 5-gallon batch: 8 pounds of Maris Otter. That's it for the grain bill. 1 ounce of U.S. Hallertau at 4.2% alpha acid. That will be in there for 60 minutes. And 0.85 ounces of UK Fuggles at 4.3% alpha acid. That'll go in at 5 minutes. And I'm using those hops because I have those on hand. I figured the Hallertau, the flavor from those and the aroma will be boiled off at the end of the 60 minutes. And to try to get some of the English character, I'm going to put the Fuggles in at the last. I'm going to use US-05, Saf Ale US-05 for the yeast. I'm going to try the boil in the bag method. I have a very fine mesh grain bag that I bought at Andy Sparks' store, thehomebrewery.com. I don't know if they've got any more in stock or where they got them, but it is a 32-inch by 20-inch bag. It is essentially a pillowcase. It looks like a pillowcase, and it's made out of some synthetic nylon or polyester or something that I hope won't melt. I have used the bag. I got the bag because I wanted to do a small batch all-grain beer, and that's how I made my first small batch all-grain before I went to the 2-gallon Rubbermaid cooler. So here's the strategy. I have 8 pounds of Maris Otter, and I want my starting gravity, or my starting boil volume, to be 6.5 gallons. So I'm figuring that I will lose about a gallon of water in the grain as it's soaked up. So I want to start off with 7.5 gallons in the brew pot, because as we heard last time from Dan and Jeff, with boil in a bag, you add all the water and all the grain at once and mash that way in the kettle. So I'm going to start off with 7.5 gallons in the brew pot, which is 30 quarts, and that figures out to 3.75 quarts per pound. And the thinnest I've ever mashed is 2 quarts per pound. Now, since this is an Australian brewing technique, let me translate. I'm starting out with 3.63 kilograms of Maris Otter, and I want to mash with 28.39 liters. So that gives me water to grain ratio of 7.82. So that sounds a lot, pretty thin. So I'm interested to see how this goes. Now, I looked at to determine what temperature my strike water is going to have to be. I looked at 3 tools. One is a website called Knights of the Mashing Fork that I use all the time, and they say at that ratio of grain or water to grain, I want to mash at 158 because this is a low gravity beer, and I want to have enough body in there. So I am wanting to mash at 158 degrees Fahrenheit. So Knights of the Mashing Fork says that my strike water should be at 166 degrees Fahrenheit. I used the iPhone application called Brew, which is from the author of Beer Alchemy for the Mac. And that tool said that my strike water should be 164.6. So 166 or 164.6. And then I looked at HB Calc, which is another iPhone app, and it said I should have my strike water at 162.8. So we have 166, 164.6, and 162.8. Those are the 3 guesses from the calculators. So I am going to split the difference. I'm going to go for 165 degrees Fahrenheit. But before I get there, the first thing I've got to do is mill my grain. So that's where we will go next. Milling my grain. Dan and Jeff said that because you don't have to worry about a stuck sparge, you can mill just as fine as you want. So I'm not going to change the setting of my grain mill, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the grain through once, and then I'm going to put it through again, and put that into the bag, and we'll see what happens. So I'm double milling. Not double billing, just for any clients that may be listening. Double milling. Okay, the burner's going. I'm dizzy from the carbon monoxide No, I'm not dizzy from anything. Being sheltered from the wind. The brewpot is near enough to the outside door there, the fully open garage door, that I feel comfortable. And again, I apologize for my wimpiness and overcautiousness. But while I'm waiting for this strike water to come up to 165 Fahrenheit, I wanted to talk about the grain, which is I've got sitting in the grain bag, which is in a bucket. And boy, I ran it through the grain mill twice, as I said before, and there is a lot of flour. I'm impressed by the amount of husks that are still in there as well. I have a Frankenstein grain mill, for those who are curious, but there is just a ton of flour in there. And so, so much so that I would be cautious if I were brewing in a mash tun. I would be afraid that it would glob up on me. But since I'm doing this method and they say that it's okay, I'm not going to worry about it. So the next step is to come up to 165, and then we will put the grain in, or I will, the royal we will put the grain in and see if the calculators are correct. Okay, according to my trusty little electronic thermometer, we are at 165. So take my grain out of the bucket here. Grain bag. Woo. And in we go. I'm interested to see how this works. It's floating on top. The whole bag is ow! Hot water. Apparently 165 is hot, so don't put your fingers in the water as you're as you're putting the grain in. Okay, I'm stretching the bag. Oh, here it goes. Now it's sinking. Stretching the bag over the top of the pot there. I'm trying to stir all that grain in there. There's a lot of powder in the bucket that I had the grain bag in. So I'm going to get that in there. A lot of flour. Okay, I've got to stir this in. This is weird. Stir this in so that we don't get dough balls. That's going to be exciting to try to do. The bag is kind of loose in there at this point. It's stretched across the top, but the bag is kind of loose in there and kind of billowing inside the water, inside the kettle. There's plenty of room. I've got a 40-quart kettle, and there is roughly 3 or 4 inches between the top of the liquid. I guess now wort, or would the mash? I guess this would be a mash. And the top. It's really hard to tell what's going on down in there. Oh, there's a big old grain ball or dough ball. I'm busting that up manually. It's hard to tell what's going on in there because my grain bag is kind of, like I said, billowing, and it's kind of getting in the way of all the stirring and such. And I'm trying to get down to the bottom there to break up any dough balls, any remaining dough balls that are down in there. And let's take a temperature. This may not be stable yet. Temperature's coming up. Wow, 158. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, I guess, but the calculation apparently worked. 158 degrees Fahrenheit. That's my target rest temperature. So even if I muck around in here a little bit and trying to get all the grain mixed in, even if I muck around, it is still going to be warm enough to convert some sugars. And on comes the heater for upstairs. Okay, this is uh-oh. The top of the grain bag came undone from the lip of the kettle, so I've got to get that back in there. Okay, it's back stretched across the top. It's a little messier, and now the phone's ringing. All kinds of things happening. It's messier looking than I hoped it would be. They'll just have to wait. I'm busy. Okay, wow, that's thin. It's thin, but it looks like I've got all the dough balls out now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the brew pot on top of a towel on the floor to insulate it from the cold concrete or cement. And then I'm going to wrap it, the whole pot, in blankets and towels, trying to insulate it. And then I'm going to shut the garage door. I'm going to check on it in 30 minutes and stir it a bit. And we'll go from there. So stay tuned. All right, we're at the 30-minute mark in the mash rest, and the heater has come back on. It's not still on. It came on and then went off, came back on again. It's now 42 degrees outside, and despite my several layers of towels and blankets, I've lost about 5 degrees in the mash. I started out with 158, as I told you before, but I mucked about in there, breaking up the dough balls, and lost a couple of degrees during that process, and actually started the rest at 156 Fahrenheit. 158 degrees Fahrenheit is about 70 degrees Celsius, by the way. So I marked down my mash rest at 156. 30 minutes later, we're down to 151. So we're still in the range to convert starches to sugar, but a little lower than I had hoped. Hopefully, though, all the conversion has taken place in 30 minutes. I mean, this Maris Otter, I would assume, would be a highly modified grain. So I'm going to let it rest for 30 minutes more. If I were to do it again, I would not put the whole bag of grain at the same time in the water. What I would do is put the bag in first and then pour the grain in a more traditional way, so that I could stir the water and stir the grain and kind of break up those dough balls as I was going, like I normally do, which now makes total sense. But if you've never done anything before, you don't know the refinements in the process that you need to make. So in the future, I would put the bag in first and then pour the grain in and stir it as it goes along. The mash is very thin. It's very easy to stir, as you would think. So at the 30-minute mark, I peeled off all the layers of insulation and stirred the mash up again and took a temperature. And we've got 30 more minutes. One thing that I did do is a day or so ago, I went down to Hog House Brew Pub on Dixon Street in Fayetteville, and I got a growler of the Hop Fiend, which is what they're calling the Imperial IPA that I helped make in a small way, that you heard recorded on this show. And that Partagal brew, the big beer they're calling Hop Fiend. And so I poured myself a sample of that. And it's good. It is hoppy, and it is a big beer. So, anyway, I need to go start washing things and sanitizing things and getting them ready. And we will wait another 30 minutes, and we'll go from there. I have an idea on how I'm going to drain the bag. Stay tuned. We're at the 1 hour mark in the mash rest, and the temperature's down to 148. So we've lost about 6 degrees or 8 degrees, I'm sorry, since the first since I first took the pot off the burner and wrapped it up. Now, to be fair, it is cold. So in a summer, on a 100-degree Fahrenheit day, it would probably be different. But I've lost a lot more temperature than what I'm used to. Now, what I want to do is light the fire. And while the bag is still in there, I want to stir around, and I want to bring myself up to mash out temperature. Welcome to the boil. Since I talked to you last, I brought the mash up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and I figured out that if I took my step ladder and positioned it over the brew pot, the little bracket that holds the step ladder open or whatever is just about the right height to hang a grain bag from. So that's what I did. I hung my grain bag from that little bracket or whatever you call it that connects the two halves of the step ladder. Hung that above the brew pot and continued to have the fire on and to raise the heat up. And the grain bag drained into the pot. And I squoze it quite aggressively to get all the goodness I could out of it. And I know that will probably make a lot of you cringe. But I wound up collecting 7 gallons. So only half a gallon was caught up in the grain. So that presents me with an interesting conundrum. Do I boil in order an additional amount of time in order to bring my volume down, my gravity up, but at the same time that's going to bring the color of my beer darker? It's going to affect the caramelization rate as well as the wind blows through. Sorry about that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil for 30 minutes and see where we are gravity and volume-wise and make a decision from there. Also, this wort is pretty cloudy. Actually, it's very cloudy. It's kind of milky looking, in fact. So I want to kind of boil pretty aggressively to coagulate a lot of those proteins, hopefully, out of there. I guess that's one perceived drawback in Brew in a Bag brewing. But the good news, here's the good news. I collected 7 gallons. The pre-boil gravity is 9.5 bricks, which converts to 1037 specific gravity. And I did some calculations, and those calculations say that that brings my efficiency to 87%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil for 30 minutes, and we'll check back to see where we are gravity-wise and volume-wise, and we will go from there. So, and also, I'm going to take the grain bag, which has been retired to a little bucket that I've got here on the side. I'm going to take the grain bag and dump it out into the compost heap. And so now it's gone from a brew in a bag beer to just a regular all grain beer. The rest of the process is just the same, but I'll keep you posted. It's 30 minutes later, and I've been boiling really aggressively in that 30 minutes. The volume has come down to around 6.5 gallons, around there somewhere. And according to my refractometer, the gravity has come up to around 1044. And I know mathematically that doesn't make sense. So I don't know whether it's the temperature difference in the samples. Not sure. Anyway, I'm going to pitch 1 ounce of U.S. Hallertau hop pellets at 4.2% alpha acid. After I pitch, I'm going to, there they go, into the boil. I'm going to turn the fire down a bit because I don't want to lose the same amount of volume again, I don't think. And also I don't want to darken the wort. I didn't mention before that there were a handful of husks that somehow made it through the fine mesh of my grain bag. But just, like I could count maybe 10 husks. So I'm not going to worry about that. Also, the method that I use of measuring the volume of my wort, I have a little white plastic spoon that I have marked like a dipstick. So at one point, I added a gallon of water to an empty brew pot, stuck the handle of the spoon. Oh, I'm smelling hops. Sorry. Stuck the handle of the spoon in the brew pot, marked the level that 1 gallon was, put another gallon in, marked it again, and put another gallon. So now I have hash marks or dipstick marks on this spoon. So I can just stick that into the brew pot and kind of get an idea of where we are in volume. Now, as Kai has told us, boiling water has a bigger volume than water that is not boiling, so it's kind of an estimate. And that may figure into the mathematics of the deal. So anyway, the hops have integrated into the boil now. I'm going to turn that down a bit, and then I'm going to go in and sanitize some stuff. Now there are about 10 minutes left in the boil. About 5 minutes ago, I put the immersion chiller into the brew pot to sanitize it. I also put a couple of pinches of Irish moss in there as well. I don't know if it does any good or not. I'd like to do an experiment on it one day, but it's in there nonetheless. The temperature is now 40 degrees outside. The wind has kicked up even more, and I'm glad I'm in the garage. So, at 5 minutes before the end of the boil, I'm going to add this 0.85 ounces of UK Fuggles, and then I'm going to take it in and chill it. And at the end of the process, I'm going to, wow, it's windy. After I transfer into the fermenter, I'll come back and give a wrap-up. Also, I want to give a plug to Jeff Baer over at Craft Beer Radio. I've been listening to his coverage of the Philly Beer Week, if you can hear that, while I've been brewing, and that's one wonderful thing about an all-grain brew is you've got plenty of time to listen to podcasts and catch up to it. The dipstick says that we're nearing 5.5 gallons, which is my target post-boil gravity, or volume rather, and I will chill it down, and we'll have one more little update after this. Stay tuned. Now the beer's in the fermenter. It's chilled. I did a whirlpool, which is I took a sanitized spoon, and in the brew pot I got it going around as quickly as I could, whirlpooled it around. And usually in a normal all-grain batch, that is enough to kind of collect the trub, most of the trub, at least the hops and some of the protein, and the kind of a cone in the center of the bottom of the brew pot so that I can siphon mostly clear wort out of the bottom. This wort has a lot of trub. A lot of trub. I mean, well, I don't know how you quantify a lot, but it's considerably more than I'm used to in an all-grain batch. And I just didn't worry about it. I got most of it out of the brew pot, tried to leave most of the hop trub behind, but just didn't worry about that. After the whirlpool, I let it settle for 30 minutes, and use the auto siphon to siphon from the brew pot to the fermenter. And at the bottom of the brew pot, I just, when the wort started to turn cloudy in the siphon line, I just didn't worry. I just kept going. And so we have a pretty cloudy wort in the fermenter, but I'm okay with that. I think that it's okay. I've read in some posts on the internet, and we all know how that can go, that some protein is helpful in the fermentation process. I'm not going to freak out about it, because in the early days I used to pour the whole thing through some kind of a colander or something to get the hops out, and just poured the whole thing out into the fermenter. So here I stand out in the cold. I'm standing out in the cold because the kids are playing hide and seek in the house, and it's loud in there. So I'm out here. But I think, as far as from being a satisfactory brew day, I think this has been a pretty good brew day. It is about 5 o'clock, I believe. Let's see what time it is. I've forgotten. Lost track of time. It's about 5:30, 5:20, somewhere around there. And the beer's in the basement. So it might have been a quicker brew day than I'm used to. And it certainly was an easier brew day as far as the amount of stuff I had to clean up. I mean, I'm usually, at the end of the mash, and the beers the wort is coming up to boil, I'm running in and washing the mash tun. And I didn't have to do that today. I did wash the bag, but it just took a couple of seconds in the dishwater. So I don't know. Well, I guess the proof of the beer is in the tasting as far as how this batch turns out, but I assume it'll be okay. And I will let you know at a later podcast how it did. But my first brew in a bag, full-scale experience has been good. And we will kind of follow along. I don't know that I would like to do every batch of beer like that, but certainly low-gravity beers would be just fine. So we will check back when it's time for tasting to see how it goes. I'm going to go inside. It's cold out here. Cheers, everybody. Let me know what you think of this episode. I hope it wasn't too sort of dry with me being all there by myself in the garage brewing all day. It was, like I said in the beginning, it was kind of a spur-of-the-moment type thing. So I didn't have a chance to get company with me there by the brew pot. I'll let you know how that beer comes out. It's fermenting happily right now and smells great. I took some pictures, and I did post them on Facebook, as I told you in the beginning, so be sure and check those out. If you have any questions, let me know. Remember, we've got the Brewer's Logbook and our new Basic Winemaking Introduction to Wine Kits DVD out there in our online store. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can check out our other DVDs, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, and Introduction to Extract Home Brewing on our site as well. And we've got combo deals there to save you a few bucks. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online from us in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. We've also got shirts. Some shirts are going out. Sent a couple out yesterday, in fact. People are getting ready for the cooler weather up here in the northern hemisphere. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Witchcraft. Craft a sandwich into a meal, and a meal into a sandwich. And J&D's Baconaise. Bacon-flavored spread. Regular 15-ounce jars, pack of 3. Bacon and mayonnaise. Oh, my. I may have to try. Let me know if you've had that. I may have to try that. Bacon and mayonnaise. Wow. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, sorry, I got a little distracted there thinking about Baconaise. Remember, I can't tell who bought what from the Amazon store there. Just click on the Amazon logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support there. Also, something new I forgot to mention, we have a link to the American Homebrewers Association as well. If you buy your membership to the American Homebrewers Association, we will get a little chunk of that. So I appreciate that as well. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson, our buddy down in Austin. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.